In the shadowed corners of Norse mythology, where gods walk among giants and prophecies whisper on the wind, one name echoes with the sound of chaos: Loki. The trickster, the shapeshifter, the father of monsters. With the giantess Angrboða, he sired a trio of beings so formidable, their very existence threatened the golden halls of Asgard. They were not gods, nor were they simple beasts. They were something more, something primal. A colossal serpent destined to encircle the world, a wolf whose strength grew with every passing day, and a queen who would rule over the realm of the dishonored dead. The gods of Asgard saw not children, but the instruments of their own destruction, the harbingers of Ragnarök. This is the story of how the Æsir's fear forged the very weapons that would one day be turned against them. This is the saga of Loki's children, the monsters born from chaos, bound by prophecy, and destined to unmake the world. In the shimmering halls of Asgard, amidst gods of war, wisdom, and thunder, walked a figure of unsettling ambiguity. He was Loki, a being not quite of the Æsir, yet bound to them by a sacred oath. His origins were rooted in the chaotic realm of the giants, the ancient adversaries of the gods, but he had mingled his own life force with that of Odin, the Allfather. This pact made him a brother to the chief of the gods, granting him a place at their table, a voice in their council, and a proximity to their deepest secrets. Yet, he was never truly one of them. He was the outsider looking in, the eternal agent of change in a realm that craved order. Loki was a master of transformation, a shapeshifter who could be a hawk on the wind, a salmon in the river, or a mare in the fields. His mind was as fluid as his form, a labyrinth of cunning, wit, and profound mischief. He was the catalyst for some of Asgard's greatest treasures. It was his trickery that led to the creation of Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir, and the golden hair of the goddess Sif. He was a silver-tongued diplomat and a peerless strategist, solving problems that baffled even the wisest of the gods. But for every boon he brought, he sowed the seeds of a dozen calamities. His motivations were a tangled web of envy, boredom, and a relentless desire to test the boundaries of a world he found too rigid. He saw the solemnity of the gods as a pretense, their honor as a fragile shield, and he delighted in exposing the hypocrisies that lay beneath their golden facade. He was the fire that tested the purity of their metal, the whisper of doubt in a chorus of certainty. While other gods represented concepts like war, love, or justice, Loki embodied the unsettling principle of chaos itself. He was the unpredictable variable in the cosmic equation, a force that could create as easily as it could destroy. The Æsir tolerated him, even valued his cleverness, but they never fully trusted him. They saw the glint in his eyes, the subtle curl of his lips that hinted at a joke only he understood. They sensed the darkness coiled beneath his charm, a shadow that stretched far beyond simple mischief. They knew he was capable of profound deception, but they could not yet fathom the true extent of his nature, nor the terrifying legacy he was destined to create. For Loki, the father of lies, was about to father something far more tangible and far more dangerous than mere deception. Far from the celestial glow of Asgard, beyond the fields of Midgard, lay a place of ancient, untamed power, Jotunheimr, the realm of the giants. And within its most secluded and primal region, the Iron Wood, dwelled a figure of immense and foreboding significance. Her name was Angrboða, a giantess whose very name translates to the one who brings grief, or foreboder of sorrow. The ancient texts offer few details about her, painting her not with intricate stories, but with broad, powerful strokes of dread and respect. She was not a mere consort, she was a force of nature, a powerful seer and sorceress deeply connected to the raw, chaotic magic that predated the gods themselves. In the Iron Wood, a place where giantesses were said to raise wolves, Angrboða reigned. She was the embodiment of the wilderness that the gods sought to tame, the primal energy they tried to wall off behind Asgard's gleaming ramparts. It was here, in this grim and misty forest, that she met Loki. Their union was not a romance of the gods, filled with poetry and light. It was a convergence of two powerful, disruptive forces. Loki, the agent of chaos from within Asgard, found a partner in Angrboða, the embodiment of the external, primal world. Their connection was one of mutual recognition, a pairing of cunning and raw power. She was not seduced by his silver tongue or charmed by his wit. She saw in him a reflection of her own untamable nature. Together, they represented a fundamental challenge to the cosmic order Odin had so carefully constructed. In her, Loki found an anchor for his chaotic ambitions, a partner whose power was as profound as his own cleverness. Their children would not simply be his, they would be hers as well, inheriting his trickster intellect and her colossal strength, her connection to the ancient, chthonic world. The seers of Asgard, who watched the threads of fate, felt a violent tremor originating from the iron wood. The prophecies, once vague whispers of a distant twilight, began to sharpen into terrifying focus. They spoke of a lineage that would not just challenge the gods, but was destined to unravel the very fabric of the 9 realms. Angrboða, the mother of monsters, was not merely a passive vessel for this destiny. She was its architect, a queen in her own dark domain, nurturing a brood that would one day bring about the greatest grief the cosmos had ever known. From the fated union of Loki and Angrboða in the heart of the iron wood, 3 children were born. They were not gods, nor were they simply giants. They were something else entirely, singular beings of immense power, each destined to carve a path of dread through the destiny of the 9 realms. The first was a wolf, Fenrir. From his birth, he was unlike any other creature. He grew at a terrifying pace, his strength increasing with every passing day. His fur was the color of shadow, and his eyes held a glimmer of his father's cunning intelligence. The gods of Asgard heard tales of this rapidly growing wolf, and, guided by prophecies that spoke of a great wolf at the end of days, they brought him to their celestial city. They hoped to control him, to raise him as their own, and thus subvert his prophesied fate. But Fenrir's power was too wild, too primal to be contained within their golden halls. The second child was a serpent of incredible length, Jörmungandr. Odin, the Allfather, saw the immense potential for destruction coiled within the young serpent. In an act of preemptive defense, he seized the creature and cast it from Asgard into the great ocean that encircles Midgard, the world of humankind. But the serpent did not perish in the depths. Instead, it thrived. Jörmungandr grew to such a colossal size that his body could wrap around the entire world, allowing him to bite his own tail. He became the Midgard serpent, a constant, menacing presence lurking beneath the waves, a sleeping titan whose awakening would signal a time of great upheaval. The third and final child was a daughter named Hel. Her fate was perhaps the most peculiar. Odin banished her to the primordial misty realm of Niflheim, a cold and desolate world. He granted her dominion over all who departed this life from sickness or old age, those who did not earn a place in Valhalla. Hel's own form mirrored her realm. One side of her body was that of a beautiful, living woman, while the other was the pale, lifeless form of the departed. She accepted her charge with a solemn dignity, becoming the powerful and detached queen of a vast, silent kingdom. The gods breathed a sigh of relief. They had, they believed, neutralized the threat. The wolf was under their watch, the serpent was lost in the endless ocean, and the daughter was confined to a distant realm. They had confronted chaos and imposed their divine order, but they had not averted destiny. they had merely set it in motion. Each act of containment was an insult, each chain a reason for future vengeance. The unholy trinity was separated, but their power only continued to grow in their respective prisons. In the worldview of the Norse, time was not a straight line, but a cycle. And like all cycles, it had an end, a violent, fiery, and unavoidable conclusion known as Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods. This was not mere speculation. It was a certainty, detailed in prophecies recited in mead halls and whispered by Odin himself. At the very heart of this apocalyptic vision, standing as its primary catalysts, were the three children of Loki and Angrboða. Their containment by the gods was not a solution, but a slow-burning fuse leading directly to that final day. The prophecies were explicit. Fenrir, the great wolf, would not remain bound forever. The magical fetter, Gleipnir, thin as a silk ribbon, but stronger than any iron chain, would eventually snap. The sagas tell that when he breaks free, the sun and moon will be devoured, and the stars will vanish from the sky. He will charge across the battlefield, with his lower jaw scraping the earth and his upper jaw touching the heavens, a being of pure, untethered destruction. His destiny is intertwined with that of the All-Father himself. Fenrir is fated to be the end of Odin. Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, would be roused from his slumber in the deep. His colossal movements will cause the oceans to surge and flood the lands. He will rise from the waves, spewing venom that poisons the air and the sea, his rage directed at his ancient nemesis, Thor, the god of thunder. Their final confrontation is one of the most anticipated events of Ragnarök, a cataclysmic duel between two of the most powerful beings in the cosmos, a fight from which neither is destined to walk away. From the grim realm of Niflheim, Hel will play her part. She will unleash her vast army of the dishonored departed, sailing towards the final battle on Naglfar, a horrifying ship constructed from the fingernails and toenails of the deceased. Her arrival on the field of Vigrid will swell the ranks of the forces of chaos, ensuring that the gods are overwhelmed not just by monstrous power, but by sheer, unending numbers. The gods' attempts to control fate had been in vain. Every action they took to prevent the prophecy only served to confirm it. By betraying Fenrir, they created an unquenchable thirst for vengeance. By exiling Jörmungandr, they allowed him to grow to world-ending proportions. By confining Hel, they gave her an entire kingdom of resentful souls to command. The whispers of Ragnarök were no longer distant. They were becoming a roar, and the children of chaos were listening. For all their power, their wisdom, and their warrior prowess, the gods of Asgard lived under a perpetual shadow. It was a fear born not of foreign armies or rival pantheons, but of a threat they themselves had helped to create. The children of Loki were more than just formidable adversaries. They were a constant, psychological weight, a living reminder of the prophecy that foretold their own demise. This deep-seated anxiety shaped the character and actions of the Æsir in profound ways. Odin's relentless quest for knowledge was not driven by simple curiosity, but by a desperate need to outmaneuver his fated end. He consulted with seers, traveled to the Well of Wisdom, and even underwent a ritual ordeal upon the world tree, Yggdrasil, all to gain insight into the coming apocalypse. Every rune he read, every secret he uncovered, was filtered through the lens of one terrifying image: the sight of the wolf Fenrir, jaws agape, charging to consume him. Thor, the mightiest of warriors, projected an aura of unshakable confidence. Yet his endless campaigns against the giants, his constant need to prove his strength, could be seen as a way to confront a more abstract terror. The true challenge to his power was not a frost giant on a frozen mountain, but the serpent coiled around the world, waiting patiently in the abyss for their final, appointed meeting. The most telling event was the binding of Fenrir. It was an act steeped in deception. The gods twice challenged the wolf to break their strongest chains, which he did with ease. For the third attempt, they commissioned the dwarves to create Gleipnir, a magical restraint. Knowing the wolf would be suspicious, they presented it as another game. Only the god Tyr, known for his honor, was brave enough to place his hand in Fenrir's mouth as a pledge of good faith. When the fetter held and the gods refused to release him, Fenrir understood the betrayal and claimed his price, severing Tyr's hand. This act forever stained the honor of the gods. They had used lies and broken a sworn oath to subdue their fear. This single event guaranteed Fenrir's rage would be absolute when he finally broke free. Asgard, the Golden City, became a fortress built as much against prophecy as against physical invaders. The gods' fear drove them to acts of dishonor and cruelty, creating the very enemies who would ensure their destruction. The monsters were not just a future threat. They were a present reality in the minds of the gods, a reflection of their own choices, and a testament to the fact that even divine beings cannot escape the consequences of their actions. In the halls of Asgard, a heavy silence had fallen. The prophecies of the seeress, the vulva, echoed not in the air, but in the minds of the gods. They spoke of an age of shadow, an end of days brought on by the children of Loki and the giantess Angrboða. Odin, the Allfather, knew that foresight was a burden, and inaction was a luxury the 9 realms could not afford. The time had come to confront the chaotic potential of this new generation. His gaze first fell upon the youngest, a creature of scales and venom, growing at a rate that defied nature itself. This was Jörmungandr, the serpent. He was not yet the terror of the world's oceans, but a formidable beast whose power swelled with every passing day. The gods watched, their unease coiling tighter than the serpent itself. They saw in its cold eyes a reflection of the world's end. Odin understood that to let this power fester in Asgard was to invite ruin to their doorstep. A decision was made, not in council, but in the quiet solitude of a king's resolve. Odin approached the young serpent, not with a weapon drawn, but with the full weight of his cosmic authority. There was no grand battle, no clash of divine might against monstrous force. Such a conflict would only sow the seeds of greater destruction. Instead, Odin's action was one of cosmic containment. With a display of immense power that rippled through the very fabric of existence, he took hold of the great serpent. He lifted the writhing creature and, with a heave that shook the foundations of the god's realm, cast it from the celestial heights of Asgard. It fell through the void, a living meteor plunging into the great ocean that encircled Midgard, the realm of mortals. The splash was not heard, but felt, a tremor in the soul of the world. Down in the sunless depths, Jörmungandr was left to its own devices. Fed by the boundless energies of the sea and unconstrained by the laws of the land, it grew, and grew, and grew. It expanded until its colossal body encircled the entire world, a living, breathing border to the known realm. It became the Midgard serpent, a creature so vast that it could bite its own tail, forever holding the world in its immense, scaly embrace. The immediate threat was averted, but the prophecy was not undone. Odin had merely postponed a future reckoning, placing one of his greatest adversaries in a position of immense power. The serpent was out of sight, but never truly gone, a constant, silent pressure on the world. With one child dealt with, Odin turned his attention to the next. A daughter, whose fate was tied not to the world of men, but to the world of the departed. With the Midgard serpent banished to the world's oceans, Odin's attention shifted to Loki's only daughter. Her name was Hel. She was brought before the assembly of the gods, and a hush fell over the golden halls. She was a figure of profound contradiction. One side of her being was that of a fair and beautiful woman, with skin and features that were captivating to behold. Yet the other half was entirely different, bearing the pale, still quality of something that had never known the warmth of life. She was not monstrous in the way of her brothers. She was an embodiment of a fundamental truth, a physical representation of the boundary between existence and the great beyond. Odin looked upon her, not with fear, but with a deep, cosmic understanding. He saw her nature, her purpose. She was not a creature of chaos to be cast aside, but a force to be given its proper domain. To fight her would be to fight an essential aspect of reality itself. So, the Allfather, in his wisdom, did not seek to constrain her. Instead, he gave her a kingdom. He granted her authority over the vast, misty realm beneath the roots of the world tree, a place known as Helheim. This was to be her dominion, the destination for all souls from the 9 realms who did not meet their end in the glory of battle. Her subjects were not the heroic, but the vast majority, those who passed from sickness, old age, or misfortune. Hel accepted her new role with a solemn grace. She descended into her gray kingdom, a place of silent rivers and shadow-filled valleys. There, she ruled as a just and implacable queen. Her hall, Eljudnir, was vast and solemn. She was not a punisher of souls, but their keeper. Her realm was not a place of torment, but one of quiet finality, a necessary stage in the cosmic cycle. Her power became immense, absolute within her own borders. Once a soul entered Helheim, not even the Allfather himself could command its release without her consent. She became a pillar of the cosmic order, a symbol of the inevitable. While the gods in Asgard celebrated their triumphs and passions, Queen Hel presided over a silent, eternal court, holding sway over the countless departed. The gods had found a place for the daughter of Loki, integrating her into the structure of the universe. But this left one final child, the most fearsome of all, whose power could not be so easily redirected. The wolf was still in Asgard, and he was growing. Of Loki's 3 children, the one that stirred the deepest unease in the hearts of the gods was the wolf, Fenrir. Unlike his siblings, who were cast out or given dominion elsewhere, Fenrir was brought to Asgard. In the beginning, there was perhaps a hope that he could be raised among them, his wild nature tamed by divine influence. But this hope dwindled with each passing day. Fenrir grew at an astonishing, unnatural pace. What was once a pup soon became a beast larger than any horse, and still he continued to expand, his paws thundering in the golden halls, his shoulders brushing the high archways. The prophecy of the vulva weighed heavily on them all. It had foretold that this very wolf would be the instrument of Odin's final downfall during the great cataclysm of Ragnarök. The gods saw this future taking shape before their very eyes. Fear, a rare guest in Asgard, began to take root. As Fenrir's size and strength became immense, only one deity remained courageous enough to approach him. Tyr, the god of law, honor, and heroic glory, took on the duty of feeding the great wolf. Every day he would bring meat to the creature, his hand steady, his gaze unflinching. A strange bond formed between them, one of respect between a noble warrior and a creature of pure, untamable power. But the other gods could not see respect. They saw only a growing threat. They saw the snapping of jaws that could splinter mountains, and the powerful muscles that could topple kingdoms. Their attempts to domesticate the beast had failed. His wild spirit was as vast and untamable as his physical form. It became clear that Fenrir could not be allowed to roam free. His sheer potential for destruction was too great a risk for the stability of all 9 realms. Yet, they could not simply destroy him. The sacred laws of hospitality and the sanctity of Asgard prevented them from taking his life within their hallowed grounds. To do so would be a stain on their honor, a betrayal that could unravel the very order they sought to protect. They were caught in a paradox. They could not let him go, and they could not make him stay. The wolf was not evil. He had shown no malice. He was simply becoming too powerful to exist alongside them. A new plan began to form, born of desperation. If they could not remove the wolf, they would have to contain him. The gods resolved that Fenrir must be bound. The gods' decision was made. Fenrir had to be restrained. But binding a creature of such magnitude required more than just force. It required cunning. They approached the wolf not as captors, but as challengers, masking their fear with boisterous camaraderie. They praised his incredible strength and proposed a game. They would test his might against the finest fetters their smiths could forge. Fenrir, proud and confident in his power, readily agreed to the test. The first bond was brought forth. It was called lading, a massive iron chain that would have held a mountain in place. The gods labored to secure it around the wolf's thick neck and powerful limbs. With the final link in place, they stepped back, watching with anticipation. Fenrir simply waited for them to finish, then he stretched, flexing his muscles. With a single, seemingly effortless shrug, the links of lading shattered, sending shards of iron flying across the hall. The gods forced smiles and applauded his strength, but their laughter was hollow. Their unease deepened. They immediately set their smiths to a greater task. The second fetter was forged, twice as strong, a marvel of divine craftsmanship named Dromi. When they presented it to Fenrir, the wolf looked at the immense thickness of the iron and hesitated. He knew this was no mere game. He suspected their true intentions, but his pride would not allow him to refuse the challenge. "If I cannot break this bond," he declared, "then my strength is little indeed." Again, they bound him, this time with greater effort. Dromi was a cage of metal, designed to hold a force of nature. For a moment, it held. Fenrir strained against it, his muscles bunching like hills of stone. The ground trembled. The gods held their breath. Then, with a tremendous heave and a sound like thunder, Dromi exploded. Links thicker than a man's arm were twisted and snapped as if they were twigs. The gods stared in stunned silence. Their best efforts, the pinnacle of Asgardian smithing, had failed. They had exhausted their own craft, and the wolf was stronger than their materials, stronger than their skill. The game was over. The pretense was gone. Now, there was only the cold, hard realization that Fenrir's power was beyond their control. A genuine sense of desperation settled over Asgard. If their own strength was insufficient, they would have to seek a solution beyond the realm of gods, a magic woven from the impossible. Defeated and desperate, the gods of Asgard knew they could not forge a third chain. Their strongest metals had been broken, their finest smiths outmatched. Odin turned his gaze downward, beneath the earth, to the realm of Svartalfheim. It was the home of the dwarves, the most skilled and inventive craftsmen in all the 9 realms, masters of metal, stone, and secrets. The Allfather dispatched Skirnir, a loyal messenger, on a secret mission to the dwarves' subterranean kingdom. The charge was simple, yet seemingly impossible. Create a bond that Fenrir could not break. The dwarves, ever eager to prove their peerless skill, accepted the challenge. They did not work at forges of iron or steel. Instead, they worked with concepts, with riddles, with the very logic of the universe. They understood that to bind a physical power as great as Fenrir's, one could not use mere physical substance. The bond had to be forged from paradox and magic, from things that did not exist. For their materials, the dwarves gathered 6 impossible ingredients. They took the sound of a cat's footfall, ensuring silence and stealth. They gathered the beard of a woman, a thing of non-existence. They pulled up the roots of a mountain, anchoring the bond with an immovable foundation. They wove in the sinews of a bear, imbuing it with primal strength that was conceptual rather than physical. They added the breath of a fish, an element of the unseen and unheard. And finally, they included the spittle of a bird, another substance so ephemeral as to be mythical. From these 6 ethereal components, the master craftsman wove a fetter unlike any other. It was not a chain of clanking metal, but a slender silken ribbon. It was smooth to the touch, light as a whisper, and seemed utterly fragile. It was named Gleipnir. When Skirnir returned to Asgard and presented the ribbon to the gods, they looked upon it with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Could this delicate-looking band truly succeed where the mightiest chains of iron had failed? It was their final recourse, a testament to the idea that the greatest strength often lies not in brute force, but in cleverness, magic, and the binding power of the impossible. Armed with this dwarven riddle, they prepared to approach Fenrir one last time, for a final, fateful test. The children of Loki were growing, and with their size, so too grew the fear in Asgard. None was more dreaded than the wolf, Fenrir. Twice the gods had attempted to bind him with the mightiest fetters they could forge, and twice he had shattered them with casual disdain. The prophecies were clear. This creature was destined to be a key player in their downfall. A third attempt was needed, but it would require not just strength, but cunning, a deception worthy of Loki himself. The gods turned to the master craftsmen, the dwarves of Svartalfheim, who forged a binding unlike any other. It was called Gleipnir. To the eye, it was as thin and soft as a silk ribbon, but it was made from 6 impossible things: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. Armed with this paradoxical chain, the gods approached Fenrir on the island of Lyngvi. The wolf was suspicious. He saw the flimsy ribbon and sensed a trick. "I will not be bound by this trinket," he snarled, "unless one of you places his hand in my mouth as a pledge of good faith. If there is deceit, you will share in my loss." A heavy silence fell over the gods. None would risk such a price. They looked at each other, their resolve wavering. But then one stepped forward. It was Tyr, the god of law, justice, and heroic glory. Known for his unwavering integrity, he understood that sometimes, to preserve the greater order, a terrible personal price must be paid. Without hesitation, he placed his right hand between the wolf's powerful jaws. The other gods quickly wrapped Fenrir in Gleipnir. The wolf struggled, straining with all his cosmic might, but the magical ribbon only tightened. The more he fought, the stronger it became. Realizing he was trapped, Fenrir fulfilled his side of the grim bargain. A sharp snap echoed across the island. Tyr did not cry out. He stood, resolute, having sacrificed his sword hand to cage a monster. The gods had won a temporary victory, but the cost was immense. A promise had been broken to keep the world safe, and the god of justice himself was a living testament to that compromise. The wolf was bound, but his howl of betrayal would echo through the ages, a promise of vengeance yet to come. With Fenrir bound, Odin turned his attention to Loki's other 2 children by the giantess Angrboða. Their chaotic potential could not be allowed to fester within Asgard's walls. The All-Father's judgment was swift, a strategic move to impose order upon the untamable. First was Jörmungandr, the serpent. Even in his youth, his size was staggering, his venom potent. Odin seized the creature and, with a display of immense power, hurled him from the heights of Asgard into the great ocean that encircles Midgard, the realm of mortals. But this was no simple disposal. In the fathomless deep, the serpent grew to an impossible scale. He became so vast that his body wrapped around the entire world, a living, breathing girdle for the earth. There in the darkness, He lay, biting his own tail, an eternal, simmering threat just beneath the surface of the human world. His very presence became a fundamental part of the world's geography, a constant reminder of the chaos held barely in check. Next was Hel, Loki's only daughter. Her appearance was startling, her body divided down the middle, one side a beautiful, living woman, the other the pale, unfeeling form of a corpse. She was the embodiment of duality, of the thin line between existence and oblivion. Odin banished her as well, casting her down into the misty depths of Niflheim, the primordial world of ice and fog. There, he granted her dominion over a vast realm, which would come to be known as Helheim. He decreed that she would be queen, ruling over all who died of sickness, old age, or any cause other than glorious combat. Her great hall, Eljudnir, became the final destination for the vast majority of souls. By placing these powerful beings in specific domains, Odin sought to contain them. He made the serpent a boundary, and the daughter a ruler of a necessary realm. He tried to turn chaotic elements into pillars of his world order. But in doing so, he also gave them kingdoms from which to grow their power, setting the stage for a future where the sea would rise and the gates of the underworld would open, unleashing his carefully managed threats upon the 9 realms. While Fenrir, Jörmungandr, and Hel are the most infamous of Loki's children, they were not his only offspring. The trickster's nature was complex, and his progeny reflected that diversity. In a strange and fateful affair, Loki shapeshifted into a mare to lure away a powerful stallion, preventing a giant from completing a contract with the gods. The result of this union was not a monster, but a marvel, Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse. Swift enough to gallop on the sea and through the air, Sleipnir became Odin's own steed, a symbol of divine speed and power, and a rare child of Loki to be celebrated rather than feared. This demonstrates that Loki's nature was not purely destructive. It was also a source of unexpected gifts for the gods who so often condemned him. However, the fate of his other children, those he had with his loyal wife Sigyn, was far more tragic. They were not born of chaos or monstrous unions, but were true sons of Asgard, named Narfi and Vali. Their story is not one of prophecy or world-ending power, but of collateral damage in the gods' escalating war with their father. After Loki's role in the death of the beloved god Baldur was revealed, the Æsir's patience was exhausted. Their justice was absolute and terrible. They captured Loki and his 2 sons. In an act of grim retribution, the gods transformed young Vali into a wolf. In his maddened state, he turned upon his own brother, Narfi. The events that followed were swift and final. The gods then used a part of what remained to fashion the bonds that would hold Loki. This act marked a point of no return. The conflict was no longer about containing abstract chaotic forces. It had become deeply personal. The gods had used a father's own child as an instrument in his punishment, crossing a line that tainted their own claims to justice and order. The fate of Narfi and Vali serves as a dark testament to the price of this cosmic feud, where even the innocent were not spared from the consequences of their father's choices and the gods' unforgiving wrath. The binding of Fenrir, the banishment of Jörmungandr and Hel, and the chaining of Loki were not solutions, but postponements. The gods had contained the chaos, but in doing so, they had created immense pressure, a cosmic resentment that festered in the dark places of the world. The prophecies foretold that before the final end, the world itself would begin to unravel, mirroring the breakdown of trust and kinship among the gods. This unraveling begins with Fimbulwinter, the mighty winter. It is not a single season, but 3 successive winters with no summer in between. An unnatural cold descends upon the 9 realms, a chilling prelude to the final age. The snow is driven by a biting wind, falling from all directions at once. The sun, Sul, grows weak and pale, her light barely piercing the perpetual gloom. For she and her brother, Mani, the moon, are relentlessly pursued across the sky by two great wolves, Skoll and Hati. These celestial hunters, said to be descendants of Fenrir, draw ever closer, their shadows threatening to swallow the last light of the world. But Fimbulwinter is more than just a climate catastrophe. It is a moral winter. The harsh conditions and desperate scarcity break the bonds that hold society together. Oaths are forgotten, kinship is ignored, and conflict erupts across Midgard. Brother turns against brother, and fathers and sons find themselves on opposite sides of bitter struggles. The world of men becomes a reflection of the gods' own internal strife, a realm consumed by betrayal and ambition. This period of decay is a necessary precursor to the end. It weakens the very fabric of creation, making it brittle and ready to shatter. The great tree Yggdrasil shudders, and the foundations of Asgard tremble. All the while, the prisoners of the gods feel the world changing. The cold seeps into Fenrir's prison, Jörmungandr stirs in the freezing seas, and Loki feels the tremors from his cave. Fimbulwinter is the world holding its breath, a long, agonizing pause before the final, cataclysmic thaw that will break all bonds and unleash the children of chaos for their final reckoning. The death of Baldur, the shining god of light and purity, was the final transgression. Loki, the architect of the tragedy, had fled, but there was nowhere in the 9 realms he could hide from the collective grief and fury of the Æsir. They hunted him relentlessly. The Trickster god, a master of transformation, turned himself into a salmon and hid in a remote waterfall. But Odin, from his high seat, saw all. The gods fashioned a net and closed in. Loki made a desperate leap over it, but Thor, god of thunder, was faster, his powerful grip closing around the salmon's tail. Loki's days of freedom were over. His punishment was designed to be eternal, a torment befitting the magnitude of his crime. The gods dragged him deep into a dark cave. They brought his sons, Vali and Narfi, before him, and there enacted their terrible judgment. Using unbreakable fetters forged from his family's sorrow, they bound Loki to 3 great stones. His captivity was not to be one of quiet solitude. The goddess Skadi, whose father Loki had a hand in slaying, placed a venomous serpent on a ledge directly above his face. The serpent's mouth gaped, dripping a searing venom, drop by agonizing drop. Yet, in this bleak tableau, one figure remained: Sigyn, Loki's devoted wife. Unwilling to abandon her husband, she knelt by his side, holding a wooden bowl to catch the fiery poison before it could touch him. For ages, she performed this selfless act, her loyalty an unwavering light in the gloom. But the bowl would inevitably fill. When Sigyn turned away to empty it, even for a moment, the venom would strike Loki's face. His body would convulse with such force that the entire earth would shake. These tremors were what mortals came to know as earthquakes. Here lies the great paradox of Loki's fate. He is neutralized, a prisoner in the heart of the earth, yet his presence is more palpable than ever. Every tremor is a reminder of his suffering and his rage. He is a god in chains, but he is also a simmering volcano, biding his time. Each drop of venom that strikes him is not just a moment of torment, but fuel for the fire of vengeance that will one day burn hot enough to melt his bonds and signal the beginning of the end. The prophecies, spoken in hushed tones for centuries, had reached their final, terrifying chapter. 3 consecutive winters, the Fimbulwinter, had gripped the 9 realms, a season of biting wind and relentless conflict where all bonds of kinship were forgotten. This was the prelude, the grim silence before the symphony of destruction. And from the heart of this despair, the first note of doom sounded not as a trumpet, but as the snapping of a chain. Deep within the earth, on a forgotten island, the great wolf Fenrir felt the world's decay as a surge of power. For ages he had been bound by Gleipnir, a fetter forged by dwarves from impossible things, the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the breath of a fish. It was slender as a silk ribbon, but stronger than any iron. Yet, the chaos of the dying world fed the wolf's own chaotic nature. He strained against the impossible bond, and the foundations of the mountains trembled. The gods in Asgard felt the tremors and knew their time of reckoning was at hand. With a final, cataclysmic heave, Fenrir shattered Gleipnir. The ribbon of magic, the symbol of divine order holding back ultimate chaos, disintegrated into nothingness. The wolf was free. His howl was a physical force, a wave of pure rage that shook the branches of the world tree, Yggdrasil. He was a creature of unimaginable scale, his lower jaw scraping the earth, while his upper jaw touched the heavens. In that moment of liberation, the cosmic hunt reached its conclusion. Skal and Hati, the wolves who had pursued the sun and moon across the sky since the beginning of time, were spurred on by their great kinsman's freedom. Finally, their chase ended. Skal, the mocker, swallowed the sun. Hati, the hater, devoured the moon. The stars vanished from the sky, and a profound, suffocating darkness fell upon all the realms. The age of gods was now plunged into an endless night, illuminated only by the rage in the eyes of Loki's firstborn. The Sun-Eater was unbound, and his gaze was fixed on Asgard, his hunger aimed directly at the throne of the Allfather, Odin. The earth did not cease its convulsions with Fenrir's freedom. The wolf's shattering of his bonds was a signal that resonated not only across the land, but into the deepest trenches of the world's oceans. There, another of Loki's children had been waiting, coiled in the perpetual darkness, holding the world of mortals in his grasp. Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, had grown so immense that he encircled the entire globe, his head biting his own tail in a perfect, contained loop. But the age of containment was over. Stirred by the violent tremors and the sudden absence of the sun and moon, the serpent began to thrash in a rage that dwarfed any storm. He released his tail, breaking the ancient circle that maintained the world's equilibrium. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. The oceans rose in rebellion, creating tidal waves of a scale never before witnessed. Coastal cities were erased, entire continents flooded, and the very shape of the land was remade by the furious water. From the churning, boiling seas, the great serpent rose. His emergence was not a single event, but a planetary phenomenon. His colossal head, scaled and ancient, broke the surface, casting a shadow vaster than any mountain range. But it was not the water that was his true weapon. As he rose, he spewed a torrent of venom into the air, a black, acrid cloud that mingled with the sea spray. This poison filled the sky, turning the air toxic and choking the life from the land. The rivers ran black with his venom, and the rain that fell burned the earth. The natural order was completely undone. The air, the water, the very soil, all were corrupted by the serpent's presence. Jörmungandr was no longer a warder of the world's edge, he was an active agent of its dissolution. With the waters of the world as his path, he began to slither across the flooded land, his destination the great plain of Vigrid. The world was drowning in his wake, and his ancient, unblinking eyes were searching for the one he was fated to meet, his eternal adversary, the thunder god, Thor. As Fenrir howled in the new darkness, and Jörmungandr poisoned the seas, the final pieces of the great war machine of chaos began to move into place. The final battle would not be fought by Loki's children alone. They were the heralds, the great champions who would lead vast armies against the gods. From the frozen realm of Jotunheim, a terrible vessel was set afloat by the serpent's tidal waves. This was Naglfar, the nail ship. Norse lore tells a grim tale of its construction, built entirely from the untrimmed fingernails and toenails of the dead. This detail served as a stark reminder of the importance of ritual, a warning that even the smallest neglect could contribute to the forces of destruction at the end of time. At its helm stood Hrym, a powerful frost giant who steered the grotesque ship and its legions of giants towards the final battlefield. Simultaneously, from the opposite end of the cosmos, the realm of Muspelheim burst open. From this primordial land of fire, Surtur the Black emerged, a being older than the gods themselves. He brandished a sword that burned brighter and hotter than the vanished sun, a blade destined to set the world ablaze. With him marched the fire giants, an army of living flame. As they charged forth, they stormed the Bifrost, the shimmering rainbow bridge that connected the world of mortals to Asgard. Under their immense weight and fiery heat, the sacred bridge of the gods shattered into a million glittering shards. And then came the master of chaos himself. Loki, having finally broken free from his own long torment, had journeyed to the land of the dead. He emerged from hell, not as a prisoner, but as a general. He commanded a spectral army, the souls of the dishonored, those who had not earned a place in Valhalla. All these forces, the frost giants from the north, the fire giants from the south, and the legions of the dead, converged on one location, the plain of Vigrid, a battlefield said to be 100 leagues in every direction. The sound of their march was the sound of a world ending. In Asgard, the watchman god Heimdall saw their approach and raised his great horn, Gjallarhorn, to his lips. He sounded a single, long, piercing blast that echoed across the 9 realms, a final, desperate call to arms. The blast of Gjallarhorn faded, replaced by the clash of weapons and the roars of monsters. The plain of Vigrid became the final stage for the cosmic drama, the prophesied twilight of the gods. On one side stood the Æsir, the gods of Asgard, led by Odin. With them were the Einherjar, the spirits of the greatest mortal warriors who had feasted and trained in Valhalla for this very day. On the other side, an overwhelming tide of chaos, giants, demons, and the monstrous children of Loki. The battle began not as a chaotic melee, but as a series of fateful duels, encounters written in destiny. Odin, the Allfather, mounted on his 8-legged steed, Sleipnir, charged directly towards his great adversary, Fenrir. The god of wisdom and war met the embodiment of untamed chaos. The confrontation was swift and terrible, fulfilling the prophecy that had haunted Odin for ages. The great wolf's hunger was finally sated as he overwhelmed the king of the gods. Thor, the champion of mankind, sought out his own nemesis. He faced Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, in a titanic struggle that shook the dying world. The thunder god fought with all his might, his hammer Mjolnir crashing against the serpent's hide like a storm. He succeeded in his fated task, striking down the colossal beast. But as the serpent fell, it covered Thor in its deadly venom. The god took 9 heroic steps before he too collapsed, his victory costing him everything. Elsewhere, the god Freyr, who had once traded his magical sword for the love of a giantess, faced the fire giant Surtur. Unarmed, he fought valiantly, but was ultimately overcome by Surtur's blade of flame. And in the heart of the battle, the 2 great rivals, the Instigator and the Guardian, finally met. Loki, the Trickster, faced Heimdall, the ever-vigilant watchman of Asgard. Their animosity ran deep, and their final clash was one of bitter equals. They fought fiercely until they both fell, each the instrument of the other's end. One by one, the great defenders of order were vanquished. The battle was lost. With the gods of Asgard fallen, Surtur raised his burning sword high. He unleashed the all-consuming fires of Muspelheim, and flames swept across the earth, the sea, and the sky. The world tree Yggdrasil groaned and burned. Everything was cleansed in a great, final inferno. The universe sank back into the sea, returning to the silence from which it was born. The inferno subsided. The waters that had claimed the old world grew calm. Where there had been fire and ruin, there was now a profound silence, a void. But Norse cosmology is not one of linear endings. It is a cycle of destruction and renewal. This was not the end of all things, but the end of an age. Slowly, a new world emerged from the sea. It was not the old world, scarred by ancient conflicts and the schemes of gods and giants. This new earth was green, vibrant, and pure. Waterfalls cascaded down mountains that had never known the tread of a giant, and fields grew crops without the need for toil. The daughter of the sun, a new, gentle star, took her mother's place in the sky, her light warm and hopeful. A handful of gods survived the final battle, not through strength alone, but through fate and purpose. Odin's sons, Vidar and Vali, walked this new land. Vidar, the silent god who had avenged his father, represented the quiet resilience of nature. Vali, born for vengeance, now embodied a new beginning. They were joined by Thor's sons, Modi and Magni, whose names mean wrath and strength. They found their father's hammer, Mjolnir, lying in the grass, not as a weapon for war, but as a tool to build and protect the new order. From the underworld, which was also transformed, two figures returned to the light. Balder, the beautiful god whose demise had set the final events in motion, and his brother Hod, who had been an unwitting part of the tragedy. Their return symbolized forgiveness and reconciliation, the healing of the old world's deepest wound. And from the ashes of humanity, two mortals emerged. Lif and Lifthrasir, man and woman, had survived the inferno by hiding deep within the wood of the world tree. They stepped out into the sunlight to become the ancestors of a new human race. The children of Loki had been instruments of absolute destruction, but in their chaotic fury, they had scoured the universe clean, making way for a world free from the ancient oaths and unending feuds. The cycle was complete. The echoes of chaos faded, replaced by the quiet promise of a world reborn.